Yahya Sinwar is dead. Iran's proxy taking another severe hit. What does his death mean for the Islamic Republic? And Israel's prime minister has approved targets for the planned Israeli reprisal strike in Iran. That's according to sources with CNN and ABC News. We'll be speaking with Amichai Stein, Israel's diplomatic correspondent for Kan TV News, Israel's public broadcaster, to get the inside look, revealing what he knows. I'm Negar Moshehedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Michai, thank you so much. You're joining us from Jerusalem.
Happy to be in your show.
So, big news. There's lots to talk about. Let's start with the death of Yahya Sinwar. We'll get to the Iran angle later. But what does his death mean for the future of the hostages and the war in Gaza, which obviously has gone beyond Gaza now? How much did he control in Gaza in terms of the hostages and the day-to-day operations of Hamas?
So he was, in fact, Hamas leader, and he was the person who conveyed messages to the negotiators, to Qatar and Egypt, meaning up until now, we know he was the main obstacle for this hostage talks. We know it also from the Americans. We know it also from other diplomats involved in these negotiations. Of course, Israel has said is an obstacle. So the question is, what now? So Israel is going first tonight for a different tactic. You saw Prime Minister Netanyahu saying, whoever allows us to get the hostages home, we will give him a free pass. Meaning Israel is trying to say tonight, listen, the dictator is dead. Okay? Now every person is fighting for his own life. So if you have hostages and you come to us and tell us we can give you this hostage, then we will give you a safe pass out of Gaza and you won't be hurt and you will be able to leave. So this is one tactic. The second thing, we're seeing the Americans speaking about initiating some kind of deal again. But the main problem is we go to square one. Who do you talk with to get an overall deal? Do you have someone in Hamas today that is, firstly, a leader, but secondly, has control of the hostages? And this is, I think, something which is quite impossible to find again. You can find maybe some leader who has control over some hostages, but overall, that can give you a full deal, that can give you something more extensive. This is a very hard question. So we'll see Secretary Blinken arriving in the region in the next few days. We'll see Biden speaking with leaders from the region, try and initiate something. But I think Israel, at least for tonight, is signaling that they think that the best tactic is to try and persuade these people who hold hostages to surrender and give the hostages, and in return, get their life back.
So who is controlling the hostages then?
So again, we know from before the specific, Hamas terrorists who control these hostages. Sometimes Islamic Jihad control these hostages again, but we don't know exactly who gives them orders right now, who can give them orders what to do. That's the main story. So we don't think there's one person who can say, okay, release them or don't release them. Israel, again, is thinking tonight that there's a chance that, like in every dictatorship, when the big dictator is down, there's a chance that individuals might try, to save their lives with some kind of suggestion for a specific hostage deal or releasing what they got. This is the idea right now. So that's what Israel is trying tonight. Maybe the Americans or have other ideas, but this is the tactic of Israel tonight.
And based on the photos, Sinwar wasn't surrounded by hostages as people had expected. What does that tell you about the fate of the hostages?
What we know that Israel was on this ground, was in this area for the last few weeks. There was intelligence that he is somewhere there, okay? And we know, you probably remember, the 6 hostages who were murdered a few weeks ago. They were with Sinwar. They were his security belt. He was with them. But when IDF forces operated in the area, Sinwar decided probably to run away by his own with a few of his soldiers, of his terrorists, because he understood that if he leaves with a group of 6 hostages who are not in the best health condition, then Israel will locate him easily. So he decided to try and flee by himself with a group of terrorists. And this is how we ended the story today over there in the couch.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about his final moments. I noticed you tweeted out a video.
Yeah, so the IDF published the video of his last moments. We see Sinwar on the couch. We don't see his face. He's covered by some kind of a blanket shirt, so you cannot recognize immediately that it's him. And you see him injured in his arm. Maybe his arm is already a bit taken out of him because he was hit by soldiers in a gunfire earlier. And he's trying to throw the stick at the drone that was over there. Okay, so that's the video describes the final moment on this Sinwar. Again, this is not, I would say like this, is not an intelligence operation, a huge operation, or the best Israeli unit that located him. These are simple soldiers who were operating on the ground. Yes, Israel started this operation because there was general information that Sinwar is there, but it was regular troops. It wasn't an elite unit of the Israeli forces. They went there, they saw a free armed terrorist. They fired, they had a gun exchange. At some point, the two terrorists ran to one direction and Sinwar ran to another direction. Again, they located them, they fired at them, they hit them. And only later, when the forces came, because again, there was intelligence, so they wanted to check who exactly they killed, then they found out it's Sinwar.
Yeah, it's really a remarkable story of how it all unfolded and his final moments, of course. Let's talk about the Islamic Republic of Iran and its proxies. We've got Hassan Nasrallah, Ismail Haniyeh, and now Yahya Sinwar all eliminated. I mean, this is pretty significant. What does this mean for the future of the Islamic Republic of Iran and how it deals with its proxies that have created this ring of fire around Israel through its proxy wars?
I think, first of all, the main story was the killing of Nasrallah, because Sinwar, the assumption is that at some point Israel would capture him or assassinate him or kill him. Okay, that was the assumption. I think Iran didn't think that Israel would go all the way and kill Nasrallah and do a ground operation in Lebanon, which would damage completely Hezbollah capabilities. Again, it's not that Hezbollah doesn't exist anymore, but its capabilities have gone down drastically. So this is the main story when you look at Iran, because again, what happened on October 7th, Iran, at least from what we know, didn't know it's supposed to be on that date. Okay, they didn't oppose, they knew the details, but they were caught by surprise that this was the date, so they couldn't do, let's say, anything to keep Hamas. When it came to Hezbollah, they did have some opportunities. For example, they could have pressed Nasrallah to agree to a ceasefire, okay, a few weeks ago, and everything would have looked different. And then Hezbollah would have stayed in power with power. But now, like you said, Hamas is out. Again, his capabilities have gone drastically down. Hezbollah also the same story. And politically, Lebanon, the countries that are trying to rearrange the political system in Lebanon, meaning taking down the Iranian influence there. And now the question is the story of Iran. They're awaiting some kind of Israeli response. Again, from what we know from the report, it's not going to be against the nuclear sites and the oil fields, but they're threatening to respond if Israel attacks. So if they respond, then Israel sees itself as free of what it promised it won't do it at the first time to the Americans. And then Iran will have much more to lose. That's why Iran is conveying messages that if the response is limited, then Iran won't respond back to Israel. So Iran is trying to scale down the Israeli response against Iran.
Do you think it's going to work? And how will the death of Yahya Sinwar impact all of this?
I think the death of Sinwar can cause maybe the Iranians to convey messages to the Americans. Listen, if you take the fire down, the firepower of Israel down, when they come to strike us, then we might try to close a regional maybe deal in Lebanon, in Gaza, because they have influence. But I think Israel is kind of focused on what the response should be and have decided what response what the response needs to be and what exactly response they want to do on what sides, on what issues. So I think it's going to be very difficult for the Americans to try and take this idea and persuade Israel to take things down.
And so you, as an Israeli journalist, as someone who I've noticed you get a lot of scoops and you're talking to these decision makers, you truly believe it's going to be limited to military targets then? You don't think there's going to be a change of heart, or that the death of Yahya Sinwar would potentially change the game plan now?
No, I don't think it will change the game plan. Again, from what I know, the US, let's say, is quite okay. That's the phrase I will say, with the kind of Israeli response that is planned. Okay, they're not too happy about it, but they can live with it. Okay, if it was the nuclear site or the oil fields, it would have been a different story. So Israel is really trying to focus its response on something that the Americans can agree to. And again, you've got the oil fields. We're talking about usually about the Americans' view on this, but you've got also the Gulf countries, which are supposed, let's say, to support an Israeli strike against Iran. If you go for the oil fields, the Gulf countries will be very mad. Okay, that's the message Israel got from back channels. So I think it won't change the Israeli response. I think maybe the Americans will come to Israel and tell them, guys, maybe delay a bit your response because there's an opportunity now in Gaza. So let's stay focused on Gaza, and you can wait with your response on Iran. So that might influence. I believe things like that, or maybe already or being said behind the scenes. But again, it will be Israel's final decision. And, Israel waited 2 weeks. If Israel think there's maybe an opportunity to release hostages, if there's no strike on Iran, I think Israel maybe will go for this opportunity. Again, it's not completely not striking Iran, but waiting a bit.
And would you think they would wait potentially for the elections, the U.S. elections that are coming up pretty soon?
Up until now, the assumption was that Israel wants to do it before the U.S. elections, but the Americans want it to be far enough from the U.S. elections. Okay, so not close, because you don't want to go for in the last moment to the election day when there's a possibility of a full-scale war in the Middle East. Okay, so that was the assumption up until now. Again, the death of Sinwar might cause people to say, okay, let's wait a bit. But again, the idea of Israel is to respond before the US elections. That's my understanding.
And can you give us a little behind the scenes look at the Israeli government? Is everyone agreeing when it comes to the policy on Iran here?
Yes, at the end, yes. There's sometimes statement that says we need to go for the nuclear side. This is a great opportunity. But the truth is, everyone knows behind the scene what Israel can do or can't or cannot do, and what the Americans are saying. So it's nice to say when you're from the opposition, you can go for the nuclear sites, you can go for the oil fields, you can go for a regime change or things like that. But when you're in government, it's different then. So everyone supports a response. I look at some of these ideas or suggestions where you should respond as, okay, it's very easy to say it from the opposition right now, but the opposition 2 years ago was in the government and they didn't do anything about it. So it's very easy to scream. And you're seeing Netanyahu not trying to raise the bar too much in his statements about the possibility of an option of response. So they're telling us it will be it will be against specific side. It will be something that we haven't seen before, but again, they're not raising the bar too much.
And let's talk about how you see the end game here. What is the end game for Benjamin Netanyahu?
again, politically, elections in 2016, 26, sorry. Like he wanted in the beginning when the government ends his period. Again, everyone thought a year ago he wouldn't survive politically. Now he has survived politically, and he can survive politically for another 1.5, 2 years without a problem. Strategically, Netanyahu always saw Iran as the main enemy of Israel. He always talked about the nuclear. But at the end, also Netanyahu knows what are the limits. And Netanyahu, even this war, people will say Israel has done great with Hamas and great with Hezbollah. But at the end, when you look at what happened or the discussions in the weeks before, Israel's mind at the end was to find some kind of a diplomatic solution in the north. Okay, Israel was in the idea of doing some kind of diplomatic solution or hostage in Gaza. So, I mean, at the end, great things have happened to our enemies in the last few weeks. But when you look at the strategical idea of Israel, a few weeks ago, 2 months ago, the idea was to do some kind of a deal also in Gaza and also in the north. Luckily, on this issue, both the enemies, both Sinwar and both Hezbollah and both Nasrallah said no. And at the end, they found their death. But at the end, the idea of Israel was to do some kind of a diplomatic solution. They said no. They miscalculated again how far Israel was willing to go at the end, especially Nasrallah. And that's the story. So I don't want to tell you that Netanyahu is talking nuclear, but the idea that Netanyahu will now use the opportunity to go for the nuclear side and do what he's talking about for 15 years, I a bit doubt it. But let's see.
That's interesting. Let's talk about Netanyahu's messaging here. He's been speaking directly to the people of Iran and Lebanon, saying it's not about you, it's not about the people, it's about the regime, everything's going to be targeted. But how realistic is that, especially when it comes to this potential strike on Iran?
I think the main idea is that to weaken the power of, in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Iran, the leadership. Again, no one will say, I don't think it will cause the Iranian or the Lebanese population to revolt. But the idea is, again, to move in the message that you're suffering because of them. Okay? It's not, we didn't want a war. If you make them weaker, if you take down their political power, then things can change dramatically. That's the idea of these messages. Again, I don't think it will make anyone revolt, but people, when they think things like that or hear like things like that, might change their view a bit.
So you don't think it's about regime change then?
The dream is regime change, but does anyone think that some kind of a statement of the prime minister can cause the Iranian public to do a revolution against the leadership? I doubt it, but the idea is to show them that if Israel strikes ABC in Iran, and this might show the public that the leadership is weak at this point, and maybe it's time to go for protest, to do something, but it's not a dramatic move to try and move some kind of revolt inside Iran.
And as a journalist, do you see an end to any of this? I mean, if Israel strikes back against Iran for what Iran did to Israel, and then Iran strikes back against Israel for that, I mean, are we going to see an end here?
No, in this scenario, there's no end. But if Iran doesn't strike, there's an end in the story at the end. If after the ground operation, there's a deal, a diplomatic path, which includes things that Israel wants, then again, Lebanon can go for a deal. By the way, Israel will go for a deal in Lebanon only after the ground operation ends. With Iran, if Iran strikes back, then you will see that the same story all over again. But the question, will Iran strike back, or will Israel strike target that will allow Israel to say, we hit the targets, and Iran to say, no, you didn't. And then you can do some kind of a vague operation that says Israel will say we hit them, they say we don't, and then you close the round.
And I was going to ask you about kind of the flow of information. We've been seeing a lot of leaks recently. Axios was reporting that there's tensions, mistrust between the White House and Netanyahu. Why are we seeing so many leaks for this regional conflict in the Middle East?
The mistrust in Netanyahu is huge. You let's say the truth. You don't see U.S. leaders talking with Netanyahu directly. You saw Biden speaking with Netanyahu in the last week twice, but this is rare. Remember, for 7 weeks, Biden didn't speak with Netanyahu at the end. Netanyahu was in New York. Blinken didn't meet Netanyahu. He met Dermer. He's Israel's strategic minister and a close advisor of Netanyahu. So there's huge mistrust on Netanyahu. They think he's trying to gain political cap over this war and making some of the decisions only to get good polls and good numbers amongst the public. And they don't see an end right now to what's going on, and I think that increases their frustration again. But we don't, let's look at the hostages, for example. Their frustration is on Hamas, but still they feel that Netanyahu maybe could have done a bit something more like this. But it's not the truth. Okay, they're trying to put they're trying to put out the frustration. Let's say much more better.
What do you mean by it's not the truth? Can you elaborate?
Because at the end, Netanyahu was willing to accept the Biden proposal. The Biden proposal was a bit vague on a few issues that allowed Netanyahu to say, this is what I want in these vague terms. But Hamas, let's say, completely changed the terms when he demanded more murderers to be released in the first round of deal. So Netanyahu played on the vague issues, but Hamas put a new demand, and that's what stopped at the end of negotiations. So that's the story right now, and let's see, a lot of frustration amongst the administrations, but sometimes this frustration is not real. I mean, it's not that Netanyahu is doing something because I remember in the beginning of the war, some U.S. officials briefed reporters that they think Netanyahu will want a full-scale war in Lebanon to stay in the political system and not being taken down as prime minister. But it was the complete opposite, because Netanyahu didn't want a war in Lebanon. He didn't want the option that there will be a full-scale war, and then, back then they thought there will be massive destruction in Israel, electricity cuts. So that was the complete difference. So we're seeing these frustrations from the beginning of the war.
And with the regular, everyday Israelis that you're speaking to, how are they feeling about all of this and this potential strike looming on Iran? What are their feelings?
That they want it to come. Clear and simple. They want it. The debate is how far to go, but everyone agrees we want the strike to happen. That's the debate, the only debate here on Iran.
And how do they want the strike to unfold?
Again, like I told you earlier, some will say nuclear, some say military side, some say if you go for the oil, it's not a good idea because the anger of the world on the oil prices will go higher. But again, the conflict is not if, but how much to go.
And just to end things off here, how do you see the next day? I mean, it's in the evening right now for you in Israel. How do you see the next day after Sinwar's death?
The truth is, I think no one knows. You saw, I must tell you as a reporter, we try to predict things in the war. You can't really predict them, okay? You don't know how the next day will be, what will happen tonight. It's very hard to predict here. And again, the question after Sinwar is less what Israel might do. I think it's more what the Gaza public will do. Will it take down the fear from Hamas and cause them to do some kind of revolt, some kind of skirmishes against Hamas people? That's the big question, I think, of the day. It's less, I think, what Israel... So Israel will try to do a hostage deal, will continue the operation. But the question is, again, will it cause the Gaza people to revolt against this. And if this happens, it will be a huge change. By the way, the same story in Lebanon. If what's going on with Hezbollah will cause the Lebanese public to revolt against Hezbollah and take down their power and put a full president with powers that will change things, again, then things will be different. But other than that, Israel will continue the operations. And maybe, in Lebanon, someday there will be a deal or a diplomatic deal. In Gaza, the operation will continue. It's less feasible to see there a deal. But I think the question is what the people in Lebanon and Gaza will do tomorrow.
And do you have a positive outlook on that, or do you see things spiraling out of control? What are your conversations like right now with, I know you've been working all day with Israeli officials, if you could reveal some of that to us?
I think no one knows. No one wants to bet. I think some of Israeli officials are, let's say, surprised that people in Gaza haven't revolted yet. But again, at the end, it's the Hamas civil structure that is still operating over there. That's why the civilians need them. Okay, if this collapses and other things collapses, then things changes. But again, trying to bet what the day will bring tomorrow in Gaza, in Lebanon, is a bit difficult right now. Hopefully, the people will revolt. But it's a prayer we are hearing in both regions for about a year.
And I'm just curious also, what have your conversations been like with Israeli officials and everyday Israelis on the death of Sinwar? How would you describe that to us?
Complete happiness. Really, it's in my neighborhood, people went out with alcohol bottles and whiskey and poured glasses. We waited for this moment. We always waited for this moment, and it finally arrived. People were very, very happy. You saw places around Israel. You got music. You got people dancing, Israeli flags. Again, you still have a war, and today 5 Israeli soldiers were killed in Lebanon. But these are the moments that you say, okay, we took them down. We took him down. And this is, a great relief and great happiness to take down this huge dictatorship.
Well, thank you very much. We'll leave it there. Amichai, we really appreciate your time. I know you have been a very, very busy reporter.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Hit the like button, leave a comment, and give us a review. The Eye for Iran podcast series is created by Iran International, the go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.